Hey guys, welcome back to the Seafarer Social Podcast. This is a special episode to celebrate Women in Maritime Day, the IMO official day on the 18th of May. And as such, I'm speaking to somebody who has a very prevalent name within maritime, especially here in the UK, and that's Heather Enness. We have not planned this podcast. This is completely off the cuff. I text Heather this morning. I said, "Are you free?" She said, "Yep, free," and here we are. Heather and I have known each other for some time now. We met a couple of months back in Southampton, and I've been watching some of Heather's stuff. Likewise, the same. Heather has a very interesting story, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. She's
Oh, are
also
we?
not, well, I
We
hope
completely
so.
freeball in this. No
I
idea
hope
what we're
so.
going to talk about.
Well, let's start from the very start then, Heather. UK has a maritime scene, but it's a very niche maritime scene. So everybody sort of knows everybody nowadays. Um, how did it start for you? What was it that inspired you originally to consider a career as in maritime?
Oh, now we're going back. A classic kid wants to be an astronaut type vibe. My dad said, be an engineer. So I started down the engineering route and eventually kind of got into like military vibes. And then, I don't know, it was when I was applying for universities, 5 out of my 6 uni choices were engineering. And then my sixth choice ended up being a little bit random. Like, came across marine studies navigation at Plymouth University. I'd done some work experience for Rolls-Royce working on a marine engine, so hence looking for the keyword like marine. And yeah, put that as my sixth choice. They said you could do the navigation course or you could do the merchant shipping course, which is exactly the same, but you get paid. And so that is how I fell into the merchant navy, so instead of Royal Navy, and of course deck instead of engineering. So, but I didn't know much about the industry. Like it's mad because I used to go on ferries when I was little, you know, Plymouth to Santander. I've even got a photo of me wearing a hat, like when I was little. And it's just that disconnect, absolute disconnect, not realizing and putting two and two together that actually, those ships need crew and a captain and engineers and everything. So even though I was very much an engineering like lover and wanting to go down that route, I didn't know that there was maritime academies or nautical colleges that I could go and be a marine engineer for. I fell into it completely and yeah, completely went opposite. So not Royal Navy as an engineer, Merchant Navy as a deck officer instead.
Yeah.
So that's why one of the things I do is go into schools and be a careers at sea ambassador, especially where I live. I live in the Midlands, no sea, people don't know what the Merchant Navy is. So yeah, I love going into schools and chatting to them. And recently I've done a few like beaver colonies and
All right.
brownies as well, so starting them young, and of course they get inspired when they're like, oh my gosh, what do you do? And of course that's the whole premise, guess my job. And you're there wearing your rank slides, your epaulets, just chatting to them, and naturally they think like pilot or they go down the paramedic route or anything like that. And their little wide eyes, they love it. They absolutely love it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting. I've been having this conversation a lot as of recent with a few people in the industry about when the right time to sort of promote the industry to our youth is, and I think that even sort of Beaver's age, I think is almost. I mean, you can still get inspired at that age, but I feel like we should do more at a younger age. Like, you've got 4 kids. I've got a 1-year-old. There's nothing. I'm trying not to let Florence watch too much TV at the moment. It's difficult to avoid her observing her parents with screens because they're everywhere nowadays, as you know. But we're trying our best. But even when I think about like toys and board games and cartoons and books, there's nothing that really says, "Hey, by the way, did you know that maritime is a thing?" And let's create some sort of inspirational cartoon. You had Popeye when you were younger, but that's kind of fizzled out. You had the
You've
movie
just
with
reminded me. You've just reminded me, like I wrote a children's book absolutely ages ago. Like it's a rhyming book. It's geared for the younger ages. Like it's meant to be a whole series, to be fair. But the first one was, like this character was going to be a ship's captain, and it's such a lovely. Blowing my own trumpet here, but it's such a lovely little story, and but of course it would be pictures, and I'm no graphic designer, I'm no illustrator, so that's why it's always been on the back burner. But you saying that, it just, yeah, wouldn't that be great to just launch that book and what have you? But There are toys. There are a few toys. I mean, I had my old, he was my old lecturer from Plymouth Uni. I've always kept in touch with him, even bumped into him in Glastonbury. You know, like he was always keen to kind of keep an eye on, you know, some of his students, you know, see how their careers progress. And when he learnt that myself and one of the other females who was 2 years below me, that we were pregnant, you know, first kids, we all went out for lunch, and he bought us both, well, not us, you know, but for the baby, a present. And it was just like a bath toy of the ship. And you know, it was a case of, you know, like your little one's first command. And oh, that's such a lovely thought, you know. And of course they've still got, I mean, that was for my first, so she's going to be 8 in July, you know, so 8 years, that toy is still very much a firm favorite in the bath, you know. So, and they love it. And of course mummy works on boat, mummy on boat, you know, so they then have this boat, this is my boat, you know. So in fact, one second, just reaching over here, one of my captains from my last ship, so I'm a relief master with Heidelberg Materials. And so my job right now is to go around the fleet, learning the different ships and, you know, ship handling and everything, dredging. And I, you know, prior to this, I didn't have much ship handling. So of course we're using our phones, you know, like on the chart table, kind of like maneuvering our phones alongside the berth, like talking through the maneuver. And he's then just given me this. So this is one that he had, you know, from many years back. And I showed it my son over video call, and I was just like, check this out, Isaac. And he was like, my boat, you know, like, and he loves, yeah, I mean, he loves cars, trains, you know, anything transportation related, you know, but he was just like, and yellow's his favorite color as well, but he was just like, no, that's mine. And so I might have to fight him for it, really.
I think that's awesome. I think you are right. Of course, there are toys, and you did your book and so on and so forth. My thing really is, why are they not normalized on a platform as such whereby I could pop into Asda and I could go to the toy section and there's something there. You know, if I wanted to get something maritime focused, I probably have to search for it on Amazon. I can't just nip into Toys R Us or Asda or Hamleys or whatever and pick something up. And I think that it should, because planes are everywhere. You can get toy planes in any store. That sector has had so much promotion, and it's been sort of, I believe it's been promoted in the right way. But when you look at maritime, you're looking at like a $14 trillion industry, way bigger than aviation. And I don't think that we've necessarily cracked the right kind of psychological marketing to our younger generation, which sounds awful, but I mean it in the sense of letting them know that it exists, it's an option. And obviously on the Seafarer Social Podcast we talk about seafaring, but also maritime has loads of other roles available. Like, it's not just seafaring and lives at sea. It's the work that's done at shore. It's the maritime law. It's maritime insurance. There's so many different angles, and I just don't think, as an industry, enough is done to really, you know, put the sector on the map for young people. I think that, you know, doing things like going to schools is very, very important. And I know that you do some great work, but I just think we should try and get them earlier in life. That's all. That's all.
Be honest, I didn't expect to go down the whole kids' toy route in this little chat, but yeah, no, why not? Like you say, there's loads of planes, there's loads of cars, there's loads of trucks, you know, and everything like that. So, I mean, you do get boats, of course, you get boats, you know, but not as many, like you say. Wouldn't that be nice, you know? And yeah, I think that's a great idea to go pitch to Selfridges or somewhere
Oh
like that.
yeah,
Need more.
there's loads of.
Lego, just go to Lego.
My sister's got two young boys, and I think one of them went through a digger stage, and one of them went through a crane stage or something
Yeah,
like that. You know,
yeah.
I'm just saying, let's try and maybe get some sort of boat stage going on. Or, you know, that I
Yeah,
think
why
that would
not?
be cool. Heather, tell me about your career. So you gave us a little bit of information about what initially inspired you. How's your career journey been till this point now? What kind of vessels have you worked on, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so quite varied, but quite directed as well. So with my cadetship, I got to dot around on all sorts. But my very first ship was on a platform supply vessel up in the North Sea, joining in Aberdeen. And obviously, it's your first ship. You're excited, you know, like it's all brand new and you know, shiny. And so I just kept wanting to go back there. And even though after, you know, when I went, so I did a different route. I did the full degree route, you know, so whereas conventional colleges, you have your college phase, C phase, college phase, C phase, you know, I was a student. I wasn't necessarily a cadet. So I did have my third year was completely at sea. And so when during that sea time that year, that's when I got to go on a bulk carrier, a very, very general cargo, an MOD contracted cargo vessel down in the Falklands, the Lord Nelson. So yeah, I got to do all sorts, but it was always oil and gas that kind of like drew me back. So when I qualified, naturally, I didn't actually have a job because I was an MEF student, funded student through the SSTG. And so I didn't actually have a company who would take me on afterwards. So naturally, I was calling up CNI and being like, do you have any jobs? I kept getting no, unfortunately not, no, unfortunately not. And then I got a job with Carnival Cruises, but they didn't actually have a ship for me. So, and they were going to give me a month's notice before joining the ship. So I was just like,
Wow.
well, I need to earn, like, and so it was a bit of a let's try Sea Lion once more. And they were like, well, yeah, actually, if you can join next week, on Wednesday, you'll get paid this for this rank, for this rotation, which was by far better than the Carnival Cruises. So I was just like, yes, 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 I will take that, even though I'm going to miss Christmas, but that's fine. You kind of get used to missing Christmases and New Year's and birthdays and weddings and etc. So I went back to Sea Line. That's where I trained up as a dynamic positioning operator. They put me through my chief mates at Warsash. Unfortunately, they folded I was made redundant in 2015. The industry took quite a hit around that time, and they subsequently kind of like did end up folding, I think, in 2016. And I was lucky enough that I already had really good connections. I didn't overly network back then, but I had met some great people, who, just kept in contact with them through email and, what have you. And they helped me out, when they were networking, they were like, oh, well, I know this great girl, like give her a shot. And, back then you could get given a shot, let's you didn't overly have interviews back then. It was a case of let's trial you, and if you fit in well and you do well, then you've got the job type thing. So I then went to Fletcher Shipping, staying within the industry. But then when I started having children, 5 weeks was too long for me to be away. I did do a trip after I'd had my second child, because I did back to back maternity leaves. And that's when I decided to go to the ferries. So I knew that ferries and dredges were going to be shorter rotations. And so that's when I started looking into those areas. And then did get offshore as well with stena drilling for a trip, but then COVID hit, and I was then at home for a fair bit of time. Then I went freelance for a bit, again back on the ferries, with P&O ferries, with Stena Line ferries, so that's where I was kind of getting my work in there. I was also an associate lecturer for Plymouth by that point as well, doing all prep for the Officer of the Watches and the NAYS assessments for them and signals assessments as well. So I was really enjoying that element of things as well. Then I went for my master's, heavily pregnant. So I was about 34 weeks pregnant when I went for my master's. People thought I was mental before doing it, and couldn't understand how I didn't have baby brain and like gone to mush, but I managed it somehow. I pulled it out of the bag. And then I went offshore again. I went back to stena drilling after I had my third child. And then it's only been this last year and a half, 2 years now. I fell pregnant with my fourth, and I wasn't able to work offshore. And so that's when I started tutoring with Whitehorse Maritime. And essentially, yeah, I was doing that up until, I had the baby, carried on, like tutoring. And then I came back to sea in January, February. I got the job back in December. Well, I accepted the job back in December, actually, got offered it in September. And then, yeah, started in February. So I'm now on dredges, so bit of a varied, but not massively varied, if that makes sense, because I never did go cruise ships. I never went bulk carriers. I never, went oil tankers or anything like that. So yeah, it's quite an interesting career I've had, but it's been quite drawn out because of 4 maternity leaves, plus, breaking my wrist, plus college time, plus redundancy, so I do feel like I'm a fair few years behind the curve, like with some of my cohort, but equally, I've got 4 children. That's always going to happen, especially as a female, so, but hey, I'm still at sea and proving that it can be done with children at home. So, win for me, I guess.
Which is awesome, by the way. I think that
I think
actually
I'm just stubborn more than anything. I can do this. I will prove you wrong.
good, good. I think that actually, Heather, your experiences. So typically, when we speak to seafarers on this channel, almost always it's seafarers that have been on deep sea vessels, big ships. However, I think that actually you can sort of approach this from a different angle, because although you haven't necessarily had that experience, you have on the other side of maritime. I wonder. So your journey of sort of making your family has meant that you've had to pivot a few times, but that pivoting has meant that you have tried things like tutoring and different vessel types and so on and so forth. Up until now, and I'm totally aware that you're still, massively in the sort of core level of your career. What has been your favorite part? What has been the most memorable period of your career till now where you were like, I put financials to one side. I genuinely really enjoy this more than perhaps I anticipated I would.
Well, do you know what? That's such a hard question. There's so many moments because obviously there's the highs and the lows. There will always be the low days where you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? But there are times that I just, sober sailing, and I've been doing a lot of Thames runs recently as well. So it's just a bit quite an interesting pilotage, and I'll just step on the bridge ring and just look at the ship, and just feel in awe because you're just like, holy, I was going to swear then, but like,
You
just
can
like,
swear.
what? No, I'm not going to swear. I've honestly potty mouth on here. The language on this stretcher is incredibly bad, but it's hilarious, really. But yeah, I'm just absolutely in awe that I look at the ship and I'm like, this is my job, like, and sometimes I still feel like a cadet because you still feel like I'm on here to learn. What do cadets do? They go on the ship to learn. So right now I'm proper channeling like cadet vibes, But I love bridges as well. I know that sounds really odd, like going under the top. I love bridges, and I don't know what it is about it. Maybe I should have been a civil engineer, but yeah, just going through the Suez Canal, and I can't remember the name of that bridge. But there's just this epic bridge that just spans like so far, and you're going underneath it. And there was one time, I know I've commented on this before in articles and stuff, but I was sat up on the, I was off watch, sat up on the heli deck, tunes in, breeze in the face. I think I might have even been listening to Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, because I love film music. So that's my favourite genre. And in another world, I would be a film music composer. But yeah, so I was just being up there, wind and face, going under this incredibly, like, it's just so big. It makes you feel so tiny, but it's amazing. Um, but job wise, I loved. There's just so many. It's all about the crew rather than anything. If you're with an amazing crew, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's just you have a
Perhaps
great
the
time.
perhaps the question should be then, instead of the jobs you've enjoyed the most, who are the people that stand out most to you in your career so far that have really made an impact on you as an individual?
Oh, do you know what? Funny enough, I was talking about this the other day. There are. I can attribute my journey going from officer of the watch to chief mate to master to two people, and there are so many more people, but there's a guy called Jerry Board, and I only sailed with him for like one trip, and he was the chief officer. I want to say the Toys of Coral or Toys of Conqueror, one of those. I think it was Conqueror, and he. I don't know. I joined the ship as an extra second. I hadn't even been told she was in dry dock, so I should Las Palmas should have been an indication for me that she was in dry dock. But I went to join the ship. She was out the water, and within minutes of being on board, obviously having done all the safety familiarization, etc., and onboarding, I was just getting stuck in, getting dirty. Dry dock's wicked. So yeah, it was just so much fun. But like they were just like, what, who is this girl? She's just come in and she's getting cracking on. Whereas, I guess some of the one of the other second officers, wasn't really doing that. And even the captain said to me, "You've only been here like half a day. Why's your boiler suit so dirty?" And I was just like, "Just I've been down the engine room. I've been doing like this, and that." Anyway, so Jerry, he was like, "You are going to go for your chief mates, right?" And I was like, "No, like when you're a cadet, you think, oh, I'm going to be a master within 10 years." But then when you become officer of the watch, sometimes some people, i.e. me, kind of like drop back down and think, oh, I quite enjoy the second mate's job. Maybe I'll just be a career second officer, and not put in the hard effort to go to college and get through your SQAs and all that. So, but he was just like, don't be daft, go do it. Like, I'll be really disappointed if I don't, like, if you don't do it. And he told me, get onto the so Sea Lion had this safety hub course. It was an in-house thing. He was like, go and do that. Like the next one's in a few weeks' time. Get yourself signed onto that. Get your face known and your name known within the office. And I promise you, you'll be booked on your chief mate's course within like a few months. And he was so right. I was. Like I went and spoke to them and they were like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting the kind of like the email / letter saying, we're putting you through it. So I can really attribute that to him. And then Dave Barnett, legend of a guy. I was on the ferries with him, and he's now a PLA pilot. So I still sometimes see him or hear him on the Thames, on the river. And he was just like, you have to go for your Masters Unlimited. I was like, no, I think I'll just convert it into a Masters 3000. And he was like, shut up, go for your Masters. It's just normals. Like, you can do this. And so, yeah, he was the one who kind of like nudged me to go for my Masters Unlimited. So, and that was at the back end of 2020. And so I made it my 2021 goal to get my Masters Unlimited. And, even though it took me till the December to do it, that wasn't my fault. That was just post-COVID or kind of like during COVID, like how everything just took months and months to kind of get your NOE, and then get your exam booked, etc. So, but like I said, and by that point I was also pregnant as well. And so, like I say, but I still went for it. And even though my husband at the time was like, our circumstances have changed now, are you sure you should be pushing for this? And I was just like, yeah, I should. And he didn't want me to. And he was my biggest, he was my biggest cheerleader for it. But equally, he was like, our circumstances have changed. Maybe you should just, next year. I was like, no. And the fact that you've just had that conversation with me makes me want to stick two fingers up to you and prove you that I can do it. And I guess throughout my whole career, I've always had those. I meant the good and the bad. There was a guy who was at college, not the university, but at the college. And he was just like, you will never be an officer. Watch me. I will, and then the people who say you're female, like you'll have children, you won't go for, you'll meet a boy, you'll get married, you won't even, don't even bother going for your chief mates. Watch me, I will, so I've had those points, so with the good, I've also had the naysayers, if you will. And so, yeah. And whenever I do a speech, I think, some people have heard me say, like, I will stick two fingers up to you and prove you wrong, and that's probably why I'm still at sea with 4 kids, with obviously the support back home. Obviously I can't do this job without the support back home, but we make it work. So, yeah.
So badass.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the how you've managed to, obviously you just said that you've got such a good support system back home, but how have you managed to build your family, 4 children, and maintain a life as a seafarer? Because it's interesting you made that point, and you're not the first mum that I've spoke to who said the same thing about how there are people out there that will say, if you're planning to go to sea and you have any hopes and dreams of having children one day, unfortunately, we don't see the point of investing in you because you will eventually leave. How do you sort of navigate that? I know that you've said yourself that you're a stubborn person. You put your 2 fingers up and you get on with it. But
I'm a nice person as well, by the way.
yeah, I know you are. I know you are, Heather. I know you are. But I think that's important though, to have that attitude for sure. How have you managed to navigate that? And what do you think? I mean, is it just yourself as an example? But what do you think the industry can learn to be able to create a how to say, more comfortable, better experience environment for women that wish to be mothers and seafarers?
So it doesn't have to be women, and I know I should be proud to the woman, but like parents, I try to be inclusive. I know I'm mummy at sea, and a lot of my posts are kind of like regarding women, but I do try to be inclusive because single fathers, like what do they do? So it's not just about the mothers, okay, but. I mean, from a family point of view, for me, like we are lucky that my mum is half an hour away. She's retired. And I mean, okay, there was a few years back she went through chemo, so we weren't able to actually have her help, and obviously we were trying to support her through her chemotherapy and etc. So at that point we had to get au pairs, and so like I say, I'm very fortunate that we have the space to be able to have someone live in with us, and obviously the cost of it as well, although the cost is actually cheaper than shoving them into nursery 5 days a week, because that's just astronomically expensive. But we make it work. We do make it work from that side of things. My husband, now that I'm back full time again, he's dropped down to a 4-day working week, but he still works pretty much the same hours that a full-time person would. He's just condensed it, and so he gets the day that he can sort stuff out or do projects or just have time to himself. So we have that, and like I say, my mum's around that we can lean on, plus we schedule in the au pair. So girls are at school, the boys are at nursery Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so it's really only the Monday, Tuesday and weekends, and then my husband's quite militant, or he's very, he schedules, key with schedules, like figuring out what's happening when, especially now the kids do birthday parties and ballet and disco dance, and cricket as well. So cricket's just now started back up again. So Friday nights are crazy, but we make it work, because it's that talking to each other, the comms, the schedules, making sure that we know who's where, when, yes, there's some leaning in on some friends, like, can anyone pick up Eloise from school, and take her to ballet, but we're quite a close-knit mum's group as well, so, and quite a lot of the girls do the same kind of activities, so that helps. And then from work wise, this wouldn't necessarily work deep sea. Okay, I wouldn't be doing 4 months on, 2 months off, or 3 months on, 3 months off. It's too long. Okay, so there is an element of compromise. Now, obviously, I started off in the oil and gas industry, and that's always been time for time, which is obviously great. 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 5 weeks on, 5 weeks off. Max I ever did was 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off when we were over in Brazil or Singapore. But so there is an element of compromise. I looked at ferries because I knew they were week on, week off. Now, actually, week on, week off is brutal. It's relentless.
Yeah.
For my husband, I can do it, and all of
Yeah.
these rotations I can do, but it's for my husband, and I have to accept that. And as I already said to you, I can only do this job whilst I have that support. And sometimes I do get the message, I'm not sure how much more I can cope. And that's really hard, especially when you're at sea and there's nothing you can do, and so you feel guilty. And I don't get mum guilt, of course I miss my children. I love my children. Get a lot of people saying, oh yeah, but you're missing them grow up. And I'm like, yeah, but when I'm home, I'm 100% home. And
Yeah.
also, I see the tiniest of changes in my children that they wouldn't see, if they were side by sides, every day in, day out, I get to see all those changes. And I actually love that more, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm seeing them grow up more because of that. So it's a mindset as well. Now, I have managed in the past to kind of get a bit of a job share rotation, but they are far and few between. And then freelance, working freelance, i.e. agency work, picking and choosing when you work, obviously summer holidays might not work, because the kids need looking after, but there's pros and cons to that as well. Obviously you've then got to pay for all your courses, and it is what's the expression, feast or famine, so sometimes there's jobs, sometimes it's not, so it's difficult. It is difficult, but we've always made it work, and we will continue to make it work. And I've always said, I don't know when I'm going to hit, hang up my sea boots. It could be next month, it could be in a year, it could be in 10 years. I don't know, but I'm enjoying the ride, and we're working with it, I'm showing that the kids, I'm showing the kids that it can be done, that you can be a strong woman and still be an amazing presence with your family, so, yeah, I mean, I'm not one of these people who calls home either. I haven't video called home for I can't remember. In fact, and even then, the last time I called home, it was to speak to my husband, not the children, because the kids do find it hard. And my son, my baby, he's just at that kind of age. And I remember it with Olivia, when I was on the ferries, it was actually harder to speak to them, because they were a nightmare for Mike after I'd hung up, so it was a case of, can you not call, when he's around, because you know, like I can hear mummy, I can see mummy, but mummy's not here.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, and then I'm just like, okay, bye. And then I'm leaving, like Mike with all the outfall of it, you know, like, so yeah. Yeah, you have to. I know some people call home every day, but I don't think I'm one of those people, you know, just because I don't want to make it harder for him.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think
I've
that
got to
makes
try and make it just as easy for him as, you know, he does to allow me to come away. So whether that's logistics and sorting things out and telling him, yep, I've lined up this person to pick up, you know, the girls from here and take them to the here, and, you know, I've got a lift for that party, you know, so I deal with all of that even if I am at the sea. You know, and I'll just tell him, you
nice.
know, so bit of a self-professed logistics queen over here, you know, like, but it's got to be done, you know, like you have, otherwise things get missed, or, you know, and appointments as well. My son's going through hearing appointments, and it's just like trying to sort that out as well, you know. So yeah, but we make it work. We make it
Heather,
work.
this is incredibly insightful information. Thank you for being so open. Let me ask you something. If you had a friend, a parent friend, new parent friend who was also a seafarer, and they said, "Hey, Heather, you know, I'm a little bit nervous. It's my first child. I want to continue my career. I'm really passionate about being at sea." What is, from your experimentation of doing all of these roles, what do you think is the most optimal rotation for a parent? I know it's probably
3 weeks.
case by case. It's difficult to, you know, it's not one size fits all. But what would you say from your experimentation has been the most optimal rotation?
Yeah, no, so I would go for 3 weeks. Less, obviously, there are rotations in the offshore industry where it's like 2 weeks on, 3 weeks off, or what have you. And the Norwegian sector is just insanely good, you know, like, but they are hard jobs to get. Again, far and few between. Obviously, if it was 2 or 3 weeks on, you know, 3 or 4 weeks off type thing, then that would be amazing. But if it was an app, you know, time for time rotation, 3 weeks. That is the optimum for me anyway. You know, 1 week is relentless. 2 weeks, you know, like you've got to consider, you know, especially on when, you know, Wednesday travel days, you know, so it's more like 16 days on, 12 days off type thing, you know, so you've got to consider that as well. But 3 weeks, yeah, 3 weeks is good. 3 weeks works for me. I
And
would
does your
push it to 4 weeks for the right job.
okay?
You know, 3 weeks, you know, I'm doing 3 on 3 off here with Heidelberg materials on the dredges, you know, so, and, you know, that works for me.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but obviously, if you can get like 3 weeks on, 4 weeks off or whatever, then that would be ideal. But, you know, not many places do that. So,
And those 3 weeks off that you're getting, are you completely disconnecting from work altogether?
I mean, you're talking to me. I'm someone who does like goes to career fairs, and I'm doing a master's degree, and you know, like I'm a, you know, court assistant for the Honourable Company of Master Mariners, you know, so I'm always doing something maritime related. But yes, generally I do disconnect, you know, it's not like I'm following work emails or like Googling or, you know, going on marine traffic to see where the ships are. No, I don't do that. You know, I don't think I've ever done that. But no, yeah, I used to get it. I'd get back into the taxi, you know, crew change day, and be like, "Oh, have you heard about this? You know, this happened." And I was like, "No, I never heard about that." Yeah, but what about this ship? Did you hear that happened? Yeah, no, no. When I go home, you know, I'm there for that. You know, no, just no.
But
But
what about on the other side? When your 3 weeks off is coming towards an end, you're getting into those last couple of days. Is there an overall feeling of dread in the house?
no. Although probably yes. No, it's just you try and make the last few days count. You know, like I think back in years ago, there would be that case where tensions were a little bit fraught because you know it was coming, but then what does that achieve? That doesn't achieve anything. Like I don't want to be arguing with my husband the last few days. I don't want to be shouting at my kids. So you go and plan something. You have the weekend away, you know, like, or just go to the park with a picnic. You just do something nice, you know. I don't know. I try not to let that happen these days. And for me, like this is my job. I'm just going back to work. It's the same as him waking up on a Monday morning and driving into the office. You know, it's the same. It's just different, which I realise is a bit of an oxymoron, but it's what I do. This is my job, and I love it.
What would you say to your girls if when they grow up, they say, "Mummy, I want to be a seafarer"?
Oh, I love this question because a lot of people would be like, "Don't do it. If that's what they want to do, go for it. Crack on." You know, like I will help you every step of the way. I won't push them to do it. I won't groom them, to kind of like guide them in that direction. But if that's what they want to do, then fine, I'll help you. I'll be doing some more prep with you when it comes to the time, like why not?
Do you think the industry is becoming more appealing to women?
I think it's stagnant, if I'm honest. Even with all these, recruitment and retention things and like push for women in maritime, we're still, National Day of Women in Maritime was launched in 2022, and we're still at 2%. That's not changed. 3 years on after this global, like drive, we're no difference. It's hard to know what the answer is. For me, it's getting into the schools. It's showcasing the job to both males and females. And with the increase of people will come the increase of females as well, especially if you have females like seafarers like going in and saying, yeah, you can do it, and proving, you can have a family. Just requires compromise. But I still think there's a long way to go. And I mean, the Careers at Sea did launch the national campaign, and it's great. Like it's something. Is it enough? I'm not sure, but it's something. And in fact, even the last few days, they've just launched on YouTube like like a documentary following seafarers, and so it's a step in the right direction. But I think what a lot of companies forget, LinkedIn, with your algorithms, it's the same people seeing it. It's not new people seeing it, and we need new people seeing it.
Yeah.
And you're only going to do that if you get into into schools and what have you, and go for the wider audience.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. One of the things I see a lot nowadays with sort of younger generation. I mean, I'm part of the younger generation, but those below me, the next generation of 18, 16-year-olds, is because of the likes of social media and everything's digital now. It can almost be quite overwhelming, the choice of what you want to do with your life. And actually, a lot of people sit in that sort of, I don't know what I want to do with my life for quite a long time. Who would you say, male or female, who would you say is the perfect avatar for an individual what are the characteristics of a perfect avatar that could consider a career at sea?
Someone with drive, resilience, willing to get stuck in, a bit academic. There is an element, obviously, of academia within it. It doesn't matter on the age. This industry proves that, like a lot of people come into it as a second or third career, and they thrive just as much as like, I don't know, like anything more than that, like it's so individual, and it depends on the person really. But key traits, I would say, driven, resilient, and just willing to get stuck in, like a team player, always a team player. Your crew are key, so, and don't be a hothead. Overconfidence is awful as well, like confidence is great, but overconfidence is dangerous, so, but just be willing to learn, be a sponge, like don't come in being like, I know everything. You don't. As captain, you don't. In fact, there was that meme, or like, where it says, the third officer comes on board and he's keen, he knows absolutely everything. You get promoted to second officer, realizes there's still a bit to learn. Promoted to chief officer. Oh gosh, there was a lot I didn't know about actually. And then the captain's like, get promoted to captain. Oh, I really don't know a lot. But it's okay because the third officer's on board. It's that whole kind of like cycle of things. But yeah, I don't know. Just yeah, soak it in. Don't be willing to learn. Do be willing to learn, as in, yeah. So, because there's a lot to learn, different industries, different ships. It's mind blowing actually when you think about it. And then of
Yeah,
course,
you're
like
right.
you say, there's so many different jobs within the maritime sphere as well. Then it blows your mind. But one, like a bit of a gripe of mine, I think what people ashore forget is without the seafarer, there is no maritime industry. So, look after your seafarers, because without us, you're nothing.
It's a great point. No seafarers, no shipping, no shopping, as they say. And I think
As they say.
It's an incredibly relevant phrase. To wrap things up, obviously, we are celebrating Women in Maritime Day on the 18th of May. I'd be interested in hearing from your side. And I know earlier on you did say, I don't have the answer, because the answer is so complex. The schools is one element, I know, but if you had complete flexibility and range to build the whole HR department of shipping, just shipping, every element of shipping,
Oh,
from
yeah.
cruise to deep sea vessels to ferries, whatever, right? What tweaks can they make to make this career more appealing to women?
I don't like this question, I'll be honest, but just because I'm just one female. Like my opinion may well completely differ to others, and I know mine does. I got asked to do I was a keynote speaker for the Port Welfare Conference last year in September, and I had to do how better, can we support women seafarers? And it's almost like the same kind of question, if you will. And I really struggled to write that speech. I don't like giving speeches, but I always do them because to better myself. I went to the masses. I literally went to as many female seafarers, past and present, that I could, to gain their insight, because I can't talk for the masses when I'm just one person, and
Yeah.
I'm very much a tomboy. Like, it really doesn't bother me if there's no sanitary box, or being on the ship, but to some people it does. So I think, and again, boiler suits, I don't really care if I'm wearing a man's one, but for some people they really do. And I have actually got a female boiler suit on board, and it's quite snug in areas, I'll be honest. But to some people that really matters. So I think it's kind of going to the masses and saying, what are your issues? Like, what don't you like? And actually listening and actioning. I one thing that really gripes on me is when people talk and like, oh yeah, D&I, and then you're just like, well, what are you actually doing about it? And then turns out they're not actually doing anything about it. There's no action. It's just all talk. Let's see the action. And then it may well filter down and say, actually, this works. And you may well get females being like, okay. No one likes to be, I say no one, some people do, but like, I don't want to be a poster girl for anything. I
Yeah.
want to do my job. And if that means that, you know, brings people on the journey along with me, then fine, but I'm not out there to be anyone's poster girl, or anything. I just want to do my job, and prove that it can be done. And sometimes highlighting those people, that's sometimes enough to, spark someone's interest and be like, oh yeah, I met this girl, and she does it, and she's got kids, and she's doing it this way, and that works for her. But it doesn't work for everyone, and it's key to remember that. But
Yeah, I think
hopefully
you're
that
right.
answers your question. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it skirted around it, but
To be honest, I think that the way you've answered it is absolutely fantastic, because I think you're right. It has to be, there is no one answer as to how we can make this industry appealing to all women. We have to figure out what each person, regardless of gender, wants, and then figure out how we can work around those needs to make this career appealing to them. But equally, at the same
But
time,
do you know what? That doesn't just go for females. That goes in general.
yeah,
Like,
every person.
social media is
You're right.
great, but it poses the beautiful pictures of it. Like, everyone's all, it's all shiny and glossy, and look at us. Like, there's hard days, and we have to factor that in. Like, you don't always travel the world. Like, you don't always get a job at the end of your cadetship. You're living in a box. It's hard, and having someone to actually represent that the brutality of it is sometimes just as important, I think, because we can't
Yeah, I
always
agree.
sugarcoat it. You can't always sugarcoat it and be like, it's all sunsets and sunrises.
Yeah.
No,
I
you
think
know
I think a perfect example of that is Amelia Busby. She's a young British engineer.
with my
Um,
company, I got her the
yeah,
job.
and she's a fantastic role model, because she doesn't. I mean, she's not a huge social media poster, but when she does, she is sharing herself in the engine room, messy, with the boiler suit on, doesn't care, getting down to work, but making it fun at the same time. And I think that that's the key, really, is how you can be authentic, show the reality of your job, because ultimately it will only be those that see the reality and every box is ticked that will actually be the best seafarers that apply for the job. Otherwise, they're coming in with the wrong interpretation. I do also think that it is important. Another point you mentioned, which is to speak to the masses. Now, although there is only a 2% representation of female seafarers, that is still around 40,000 people, right? So again, it's not massive on the scale of 1.9 million seafarers or whatever it is, but 40,000 people can give you a pretty good understanding as to why they decided individually to consider this as a career. And I think once you sort of dig past the salary and get into the nuts and bolts, that's where I think the golden messaging is. And I do want to see more women seafarers, by the way, be platformed, because I think another thing, I don't know if this is something that you've observed, Heather, but the top 100 women in maritime, these clubs and so on and so forth. Look, I get it, right? But where are the women seafarers?
That's exactly why I did. Yeah, I did a post. I saw a load of canvassing for people, journalists and other people and what have you. And I was just like, I want to see the seafarers up there. So I did a post. I tagged as many female seafarers in there, and what? It got a great response. It got, and then I actually ended up adding other people, that wouldn't necessarily canvass themselves, just to try and be like, look, it's not always the same people, because with these things, and I'm not downplaying the women in, like top 100 or anything like that, but it's visibility. That's all it is, it's people putting themselves forward or what have you, and like what does it mean? And I don't know, maybe people think I'm a bit bitter because I've never been on it, but
No, I think you're
I've
totally right, Heather.
I want to see the seafarers, and actually some of the seafarers that I tagged in it were made the list,
I
which I
think
think is fantastic.
but I think there was only a handful. Amelia was one of
There
them. I think
wasn't.
maybe
There was
Anne
only a handful.
Pletchka was on there. I think maybe, but there wasn't very many seafarers. And also the other thing is active seafarers as well. I feel like what you see a lot is retired seafarers, but fine, they still have a very important voice in the industry. Of course they do, right? But what I quite often see at these events and these digital competitions or whatever is it will be ex-retired captain that now works a shore-based job and speaks for the seafarers.
Yeah.
But I sometimes think, well, where are the ratings? Where are the active seafarers that are actually doing this right now? What's their opinion on this? Well, they can't be there because they're actually working and doing the job. But we should.
Right, I did call someone out once on it. I was just like, that was a panel that would have benefited from basically all of them being seafarers. No, there was no seafarers on it. And I did get a private message back from that saying, we struggled to find seafarers. And I was just like, well, you just need to ask the right people, because there will be people to go on that panel, but naturally some of these things are abroad, international, and you're just like,
Yeah.
well, someone needs to pay for it, you see, yeah. But I don't know,
Well,
I've done a fair thing.
Amelia's coming out with me to North Shipping in a couple of weeks' time,
I
and
hear so.
she's going to be on a panel,
Yeah.
and I think that'll be incredibly refreshing to get the perspective of someone that's an active seafarer right now and part of the
What you do
next
have to
generation.
remember with some of these things, and again, I'm not downplaying anything, but make sure it's the right seafarer, not just because they're necessarily flavour of the month, like someone
I
who
agree.
actually knows. Because, like some of the conventions that are having seafarers on, and you're like, what do they know about that? Like, genuinely, what do they know about that topic? Like they're a newly qualified, so why, when you've got so many other seafarers, that probably have the experience that could give a better insight. But it's all good experience. It's all good, great
Yeah,
networking. So you can't,
I'd like
put it down.
I'd like to initiate some kind of event circuit where it doesn't need to be in Shangri-La 5-star hotels and multi-million pound convention centers, but some kind of event circuit globally where you pull together some kind of agenda which is genuinely appealing to seafarers. Like it doesn't need to be a day that talks about decarbonization and whatever else, but like things that actually impact seafarers' lives. Like, for example, how do you invest? How do you get the money that you're earning and invest it to try and create a life after sea fund, or how do you stay in shape while on board? How do you maintain strong mental clarity? How do you maintain a good relationship with your kids and your husband and your wife, whatever? Like, I think these are the kind of things that don't get spoken about at these events, but actually are the things that behind all of these big posh words are like the foundations and bricks that everything else is built upon.
Yeah.
Let's see.
You can only dream, hey? Like, maybe one day that conference will come about, but...
Well, Heather, it always starts with an idea.
It does. But it's also that remembering, like from the short-based side of things, like without us, you have to look after your seafarer. You have to. Because without us, there is no them.
Well said, Heather. Couldn't say it better myself. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I said it would be half an hour. It's been an hour, but nevertheless, I've enjoyed every minute of it. Happy International Women in Maritime Day. Thank you so much, Heather, for giving me your time. It's been great speaking to you. Hope that we can catch up again in person eventually when you've got to have time. And I know that your time is valuable. And I really, really appreciate you done this today.
Chris, thank you for having me.
Let's do something together soon, whether it be catch up over coffee or brainstorm some more ideas. And let me know if you ever come down to the south.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.